I'm Brandon Polite. I am an associate professor of philosophy at Knox College.
My name's John Dyck. I'm a postdoctoral fellow at Auburn University, and I'm going to try to convince Brandon today that Old Town Road is a country song.
And I'm going to put up the best Socratic objections I possibly can, because I don't think it is a country song. I think it's a hip hop song, and in fact, a novelty hip hop song. And so just to begin, just a sort of a first objection, and this is one that I don't buy into that much. But by and large, and at least for the past 50 or so years, country music has been predominantly, if not exclusively, music by white people for white people, and white Southerners in particular. And so that may be a reason that someone would think that this just sort of precludes the song from counting as country, right? Lil Nas X is African American, and so how would you respond to someone who argued that way? Again, this isn't the way I would want to argue, but someone might. And so how would you respond to that one?
Totally. So I think like race and country music are really linked in interesting ways, and I think like the Billboard removed Old Town Road from the Hot Country. It was at number one. They took it down, and I think a lot of people think that that race played a role here. So, I mean, there's no doubt that we think of country music as a white genre, but a lot of research in the past 10 or 20 or 30 years shows that country music really has been constructed for us to think about this way. But when we look to the actual history of country music, it has like heavy roots in African American music. So like A.P. Carter of the Carter family learned a lot of music from black churches. Jimmy Rogers, a foundational guitarist, learned his guitar style from black musicians on the railroad. And so Carl Hagstrom Miller, this historian, shows that in this book, which I can't remember what it's called right now, I think Segregating Sound, shows that music in the South was heavily integrated, and the kind of music that country music grew out of was heavily integrated music. Whereas when country music developed, country music executives marketed some albums as what they called hillbilly records because the name country wasn't a thing. And they marketed other records as race records. And you can see that when black musicians tried to record country music, they would promote them as, in the race records section of their catalog. They would try to encourage them to record sort of what now more like blues style music. So there's this kind of very conscious effort on the part of country marketing in its early years to make country music a white kind of music. And I think that's why we perceive it as white. But I mean, the point is, it's not really white. In fact, country music has African American roots, and the banjo's an African instrument. And just one other thing is there. So you can talk about black country music performance through the years, like Charlie Pride. Why am I blanking on her name? That's not good. But you can also think about there are more African American country artists now than probably ever before. So Jimmy Allen, Kane Brown, Blanco Brown, Mickey Guyton. So I think we are seeing a resurgence of black country music artists.
Okay, cool. So, the race factor doesn't automatically discount the possibility that Old Town Road is a country track. Yeah, go ahead.
Totally. And I think, and in fact, if we say that it does, then we play into just buying the way that it's been sort of marketed in this flimsy sort of fake constructed way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, cool. So moving on to, I think, the big objection. And just in terms of Old Town Road's sound, right? It sounds like a hip hop track, right? In terms of its lyrical structure, it sounds like a hip hop track, right? Country music songs often tell stories. There's no real story here. This is, the lyrics are very prototypical of hip hop. Even in terms of its production history, right, where the song was released remix after remix after remix, right? That's typical of hip hop. That's, to my mind at least, not typical of country. And so in terms of those things, it doesn't seem to neatly fit into the country category, right? It seems like, to me at least, it makes more sense to classify this as a hip hop song that's, using some country grammar to reference Nelly, I guess. I didn't intend that, by the
way. That's amazing.
Yeah. I just amused myself there. That, sort of, it has, it references country things. It seems to be commenting on country, if not outright mocking country music, right? It seems to me that it's a hip hop track that's, commenting on or appropriating or mocking country music. It's sort of about country music and country lifestyle, but it isn't itself country music. So that's the big objection, and there are all sorts of directions we can go with this. And so I'll give it to you to lead us somewhere.
All right, so I'll stop. Just feel free to, just hop in any point. So let's start with this point about the lyrical content. Well, let's see. Well, just on the story point. So country music, when the song came out, a lot of country artists were like, well, it's a good song, but I don't think it's a country music song because country music songs tell stories, and this doesn't tell a story. But I mean, for one thing, a lot of country music songs don't tell stories. So take Randy Travis's Forever and Ever, Amen. No story. It's just a promise. You know nothing about his life. Now, what does it take for something to be a story? I mean, people say country music's about stories, but that's true only if you have a fairly loose definition of stories. So for one thing, not all country music songs tell stories, but also I think Old Town Road tells a story. The first, I like that reaction. The first verse is about, he doesn't have a Porsche. He's riding his horse. And this, in the second verse, and on the Genius lyrics, in the Genius webpage for this song, Lil Nas X talks about this. In the second verse, he's made it. He's successful now. He doesn't have a Maserati in the, but anyways, he's drinking lean and cheating on his girl. And so the way Nas tells the story is in the first verse, I'm striving, and in the second verse, I've made it. I'm living this glamorous lifestyle in Hollywood, or not entirely successful. He's kind of morally messed up, but so there's some development of the character.
Okay, so you want to say that there's a story sort of implied within the lyrics, and if country music is music that tells a story, well, this sort of fits the minimal definition of what it is to be a story. And so the fact that it, has something of a story, sort of, at least from the standpoint of certain country artists who objected to it counting as country, it doesn't fit as country. But what about just the sound of it, right?
Yeah,
the use of sampling. Totally. And, the way sort of the beat drops in and the ad libs and so forth, that doesn't seem to be country to me, right? Just the sound of it is hip hop to me. It screams hip hop, right? It doesn't scream country, despite, some of the samples and so forth.
Totally. Okay. Yeah, okay, so the sonic elements, it does sound like a hip-hop song, you might think. Okay, so a couple things there. One thing is that country music is leaning more towards hip-hop in the way it sounds, right? So the fact that it has these markers of hip-hop doesn't necessarily disqualify it, I think. The fact that it's country music is with artists like Florida Georgia Line and Sam Hunt and who else? Jason Aldean and all the who's that other? I'm blanking on names today. it's just sounding more and more hip hop. But let me lay out a couple things in it that I think sound country. One is the sample has a banjo, which okay. Oh, I never got to the irony point in the last thing. Or we can get to that. So for one thing, the sample has a banjo. You also pointed out that like it, well, and you might think like, oh, it samples a Nine Inch Nails song, something you'd mentioned previously. But here's something. Think about Johnny Cash. One of his most famous recordings is of "Hurt," which is a Nine Inch Nails song. So there's like some kind of country Nine Inch Nails connection. Okay, whatever. That's not my best argument. Here's what I think makes it country more than anything. The lyrical content. It's about horses and boots, and it makes all these references to like kind of rural features. But also, we're talking about sonic stuff. Also, the like vocal articulation, I think, is a kind of vocal articulation. So for one thing, the melody. I think if you can just sing a melody like the chorus, like do 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 do, like that sounds country to me. But there's also certain vocal inflections that I think make it country. With namely the way the voice falls down in a typically kind of like masculine way. That's very typical of country. So think about the verses. Think about I can't even remember the first verse, but it goes do 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 do. That do the dropping at the end of the line, I think, is very typical of country music. So I think, and also the accent that he makes, right? He's got this drawl that's very country. So I think there are those sonic elements. I also found some evidence from his intentions that speaks to the fact that I think he sees the song as a country song. So in a New York Times, they have those videos, Anatomy of a Song, where they'll like interview artists. And he says, I watched one of these late last night, and he said, yeah, I see it as hip hop and country, but he says, I see it as more of a country song. So like he does see it sort of more in line. And something else I saw, so the song was released in, I think, February or March of 2019. In December of 2018, he posts on Twitter, I'm about to change country music, with this video, with this clip of the song on top of a video of this cowboy dancing. So I think like he does see it as a country track. So I mean, I started with the sonic stuff, but I also think like I discovered this stuff about his intentions last night that you might think is relevant.
So he's a hip hop artist who's sort of shifting gears to, try to change the world of country.
Oh, I think, but I mean, a couple things like, I think one reason that speaks to him being a country artist is that he's collaborating with like Billy Ray Cyrus, like who's got featuring he's got other people, Billy Ray Cyrus and Mason Ramsey. I will say, I put on the song this morning just to listen to it, and to your point, after Old Town Road, my Spotify's on automatic. And so usually on automatic, it'll lead you to a similar song in the same genre. And to your point, it did play a track by DaBaby right after. So like super hip hop.
So Spotify wants to think of it as a hip hop.
Spotify's on your
side. There we go. See, Spotify's with me.
The algorithm agrees.
Finally. This is the day I've been waiting for. Awesome.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
I forgot what I was going to say.
Okay, so is this his first? If this counts as country, this would be his first country track.
Yeah.
Right, and I think so that's one thing, right? That it's not to say that non-country artists can't make a country track, right? I mean, Ted Graysick pointed out to me that there are on Rolling Stones albums there are country songs. On Metallica's Load they have a country song. It's not a good country song, but it very much feels like a country song on a Metallica album, right? And so that's not to say that non-country albums, their non-country artists can't make country songs, because there's a history of that, right? Do you not think it's a parody though of country? I mean,
Yeah, okay.
one way you could argue is that some country songs by country artists seem to be parodies of country tropes, right? And so that doesn't necessarily preclude it, but I feel like it very much feels like a parody of someone who's sort of outside of the country world commenting on country tropes, right? By, using them, but sort of, messing with them in various sorts of ways. So I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, okay, that's awesome. Yeah, you're right. Like, you can think of a song like Okie from Muskogee, which was written with Merle Haggard wrote because he's sick of all these hillbillies at his show, and he wrote this song to make fun of it, and they're like, oh, we love this song. Yes, I'm an Okie from Muskogee. And then it got, even though it's written with irony, it gets taken up like in totally genuinely.
Maybe that's what happens here, right? That he's bragging about I'm about to change country music, by sort of mocking it or at least parodying it gently, if not outright mockery, right? But maybe it got taken. I mean, the fact that Billy Ray Cyrus he's gonna hop on anything that's hot, right? Because he's a fame whore.
Yeah,
and that's my take on Billy Ray Cyrus. I mean, right. So the fact that he jumped on board doesn't like add evidence in favor of it being country to me. But I don't know. It really does feel like a parody song to me. And maybe people, like, no, this is me. Like, this is my life. I get this. And so it's sort of like a Merle Haggard thing all over again.
Yeah. So let's see. I mean, there still is the comment in that video where he says, like, I see this as more on the countryside than the hip hop side. So I think like he seems to be but I think what speaks even more to its status as a country song is I think it's a really important country song. It plays this it plays this really important role in the genre, and it's gonna play this important role in the genre. So I mean, think about this. Like, you're to the fact that he's not he didn't come up country. I think that's what makes this an important song, is that it took an outsider to make this kind of thing. I don't think anyone in Nashville who had a recording contract was ever going to make something like this. So I think it took. Right. Yeah, they were. Yeah, even though they were sort of veering, and so I think it's going to play this really important role. And I want like a couple of things I want to say about that. One is, since that came out, I can't believe it's only a year ago, country music sounds totally different. So Sam Hunt's album Southside, which we've talked about, which I love, is at once a very progressive and traditional country album. In an interview with The Times, Sam Hunt said something like, I was so mad when Old Town Road came out because that's where I wanted to go. And like, Old Town Road pushed him to go to that place. So I think country artists are taking it really seriously. And I mean, you had Blanco Brown with the Get Up, which is also a very hip hop inflected country song. And Blanco Brown, country songwriter. I mean, you've got Braylon, who's also this up and coming songwriter who also did not come up, like Lil Nas X, based in Atlanta, but is quickly accepted by Nashville after he's writing songs. He started with this track, My Truck, that's heavily hip hop inflected. And so I think there's like definitely a narrative there a narrative that's going to be even more clear in, say, 5 years, that we're going to see this as a really important trajectory in country music. I was just listening to this new guy, Clint Johnson, who used to go by Rashad, just amazing country covers of hip hop tracks. And they like sound country, but also hip hop. So I think just one, I'm talking too long, but just one other thing. Think about the Nashville sound when producers like Chet Atkins said, let's bring in strings, let's make it sound sort of like gentrified country or like uptown country. Everyone said, this is not country music, because it doesn't have these markers. In retrospect, though, what would we call like Patsy Cline? You wouldn't say Patsy Cline isn't country, So I like, what else would we call the Nashville sound or countrypolitan other than country? So I think like in retrospect, it's going to become clear that this is a really important catalyst for country music.
Does it matter that Chet Atkins is coming from within the country community, whereas Lil Nas X is coming from outside of the country community? Does that matter at all? I mean, I'm honestly not sure. I don't think it automatically matters, right? But does that matter that, you know, Chet Atkins is within the community trying to make progress within it, whereas Lil Nas X is, you know, coming from the outside saying, I'm going to change this community, right? And, you know, there's an argument to be made that country does need to change, right? That you can't just sort of spin its wheels forever. Maybe, you know, I have no idea, but maybe sales are declining, the market's changing and so forth. So in order for it to survive as a genre, it needs to, you know, change perhaps in the way that you know, Old Town Road is pushing it. I don't know. Do you think the fact that he's an outsider, you know, who's you know, basically an Atlanta trap artist, you know, making hip hop tracks, who's now made something that sounds very much like a, you know, trap song, right? That just has sort of a country twang to it.
Yeah, totally. Okay. And let me just on that last point, I just want to say trap is infecting every genre.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, in the past, like what, 7 years now, we've got trap beats in R&B and increasingly in pop, indie kind of stuff. So like there is just that general infusion of trap. I mean, I think the next thing is SoundCloud rap is just starting to infuse. Mm-hmm. But okay, I think you're totally right. I think it does make a difference that Lil Nas X is an outsider, and especially in the case of country music, where I don't think there's any other genre that's so intimately tied to a place as country music is tied to Nashville, which is like a really interesting feature about country music, and also that's tied to like it's like ironic institutionalization, despite the fact that it portrays itself as this like genuine, real American frontier arts. Like it's very institutionalized. But so I think that does speak, you know, that is a consideration. However, I think the fact that it's just been like it's received such uptake from progressive country music artists just speaks to the fact that it is on the verge of something new. I mean, so there's one important difference with Chet Atkins, which is that someone asked him one time, what's the sound of country music? And he jiggled the change in his pocket and he said, what's the Nashville sound? And he jiggled coins in his pockets and he said, that's the Nashville sound. So it's the sound of money, right? Like, yeah. And really what they're going for is more radio play. Country music has always evolved ever since the 40s, 30s, has always evolved to try to get more radio play and appeal to more audiences. I think it's doing that again. But one thing that I think this is going to be a catalyst for is progressing the genre beyond what it looks like. Whereas I think now we would say the Nashville sound was kind of retrograde. It does not sound cool, it was not progressive the way, say, like neo-traditional country like George Strait was in the 80s. So yeah, like I think you're right, the outsider thing does matter, but I think the fact that it's received such uptake from people like Sam Hunt speaks to the fact that it's moving the genre forward.
Yeah, so one point you made is that it had to be an outsider basically to sort of push country in a new direction, that this wasn't really going to happen from within because of how institutionalized and how sort of conservative in terms of, you know, maybe not politically conservative, but economically conservative in terms of, you know, we're going to maintain this is our product. We're going to keep the product this way. We're going to keep, you know, pushing it out. And, you know, so long as people are still buying it, we don't need to change much. Right. And so, you know, maybe the Nashville folks had a vested interest in keeping country the way it is, whereas, you know, maybe people on sort of the margins of that within the country community, right, were less taken with that. And then here comes this guy, you know, out of left field entirely, that produces this song that now they can glom onto this, right? That, oh, this is the direction we can go, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean that Old Town Road's a country song, right? In the same way that, you know, Iggy and the Stooges come along, the MC5 come along out of Detroit, right? They're making this super loud, super aggressive music. It's not punk, but, you know, anyone in the early punk scene was influenced by this, right? And so, you know, they're like the godfathers of punk without themselves being punk. So maybe, you know, Lil Nas X sort of fits the Iggy and the Stooges and MC5 mold, right? Where he's sort of a godfather of a new offshoot of country without himself having produced a country song, right? Now, I don't think that's a slam dunk argument, but I think it's one way to think of it, right? Because again, sonically, it does not sound to me like country music, right? So maybe it's just so far ahead of its time that, no, it just doesn't count right now. But maybe in 5-10 years time, country music just sounds like Old Town Road, right? You know, but again, that doesn't necessarily mean that as of today, right, or as of its release a year plus ago, right, it was a country song.
Yeah, I really like that art. I really like that. So a couple things. One, I just still like, I guess one thing I didn't emphasize before, but I do want to emphasize is that to me it does sound like a country song. Like, and so, you know, I mentioned that he intended as a country song. It also first appeared on the Billboard Hot Country. So I mean, at least there's some initial recognition. Also, when you look at all those early TikToks, because you know it went super big on TikTok before anything else happened to the song, everyone's wearing a cowboy hat and like doing some kind of like lasso kind of thing. So like I think maybe we just hear the song differently. To me, it does, and like we could talk about the like tropes I mentioned before, but to me there are like markers of it that do at least heavily suggest it's a country song. As to the what was the oh right, could it be a country, right, could it influence country music without itself being country, which I really like that view. So I guess I'm too much of a Noel Carroll student so like Noel has this narrative view of art where something counts as an artwork if you can fit it in this narrative story you tell about art. And I think the same is true for genres. So I think something counts as an instance of a genre if you can fit it in, let's say, the right or a sufficiently plausible narrative about what the genre is, or you know, about the genre. And I think there's no doubt that Old Town Road is going to play a really pivotal role there. So I mean, you know, there's there's a view about what makes something count as an instance of a genre.
Okay, but I mean, so like T.I., you know, influences trap music, you know, sort of brings it into existence by, you know, being influenced by New Orleans bounce and so forth, right? Is T.I. a country artist then? Right? If you know, the trap is clearly infused in Old Town Road, and you know, if that, you know, sound and that way of doing music becomes a marker of country, is now T.I. a country artist because he fits into this narrative now? And does that mean that Big Frida and New Orleans bounce artists are now, like, how far does this go, right? This seems a bit nebulous to me.
Okay, let me tighten it up a bit. Yeah, you're right. I left it wide open. What I should have said is that it fits into a narrative place if it's both influenced by the genre and it influences the genre. And I think Old Town Road is clearly influenced by country music in the ways I talked about: the vocal inflection, the banjos, the kind of melodic structure. But the interesting thing is that it does so much with that. Like it sort of blows it out into left field. And it's also like there's stuff there that's happening. Like you can look at Sam Hunt tracks or Florida Georgia Line tracks from like earlier in the 2010s that, you know, are pushing, you know, like it's not completely out of left field either. So I mean, did Lil Nas X even listen to Sam Hunt? I don't know. But I think there was like something in the air there. So and so sorry. Anyways, the main point is I think it was also influenced by country music. So whereas Big Frida like wasn't influenced by country
Yeah,
music. So you know there has to be a sort of like, you know, it goes both ways, I guess.
Okay, cool. I guess we should wrap this up because we've been talking for about 30 minutes now. But this was super fun. I don't know if I'm totally convinced, but I'm leaning more toward your position as a result of this than my initial. And I think, you know, largely because you listen to way more country music than I do. And so, you know, you're more of an expert on what country sounds like and what it has sound like leading up to Old Town Road coming, you know, dropping in 2019. So John, thank you so much for enlightening me on this subject.
Well, I'm glad I could like at least make you more open to the possibility of Old Town Road as a country song. And this was so fun.
This was
Thanks for thinking
amazing.
of this. This is so fun.
Yeah. Thanks so much. Take care.
Thank you.